I have the honor of serving as the Speaker of the House. Tonight, however, I stand before you not only as a speaker. I speak to you as a father, a former small business owner, and a taxpayer. And like many of you, I worry about a future that feels less secure than it should. A lot has changed in recent years. Our southern border was once secure. Now the number of illegal immigrants who cross our border in just 2 years easily exceeds the population of 25 states. Americans are getting hammered by high prices. Today, nearly 2/3 of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Meanwhile, China is infiltrating our culture, our farmland, and our skies because they see us as weak. This is not sustainable. But of all the dangers we face, the greatest threat to our future is our national debt. You deserve the truth. So let's start with the facts. Our national debt is high, too high. And the problem is getting worse, not better. We are now $31 trillion in debt. That is more than the size of the entire American economy, 20% more. Our debt is now a greater burden than it has been at any time since World War II. If we continue down this path, in the next 10 years, we will spend over $8 trillion just on interest. That's more than the entire federal budget this year by a lot. That is neither affordable nor sustainable. When debt is too high, inflation is the result. That is where we are today. Inflation has exploded. Mortgage rates have doubled. Working Americans, after inflation and taxes, have gotten a pay cut. And eggs, a staple of America's breakfast, have gone from a cheap source of protein to a luxury good. Like many Americans, you may be wondering, how did we get here? Yes, our nation has taken on debt for most of its history, but the last few years have been different. Washington fell for a financial fad, a fiscal fraud, that the national debt doesn't matter, that money can always be created out of thin air to pay for it, and that the solution to higher prices is higher taxes. For years, we've watched as Democrats in Congress spent your hard-earned tax dollars like the dollars were imaginary. Thanks to 4 years of runaway spending by the Democrats, they increased annual discretionary spending by $400 billion. That's a 30% increase in just 4 years. They took our nation's credit card, spent like crazy, and left us in deep debt. But not once did they seek or accept any responsibility. Instead, they doubled down. In 2021, Democrats passed the largest debt limit increase in American history. Then they maxed our nation's credit cards again just 13 months later. Now, President Biden wants Congress to raise the debt limit yet again, without a single sensible change to how government spends your hard-earned money. None. Does that sound responsible to you? Now, if you had teenagers and they spent past the limit on a credit card, yes, you pay for it. But, now this is important, you don't allow their bad spending habits to continue. You change their behavior so it never happens again. You teach them to be sensible, responsible, and accountable adults. Well, I think I speak for most Americans when I say it's time for Washington to change its behavior and act like adults. 90 days ago, the American people chose to give Republicans power in the House of Representatives. Because we are committed to finding solutions that curb inflation. At its source, wasteful Washington spending. We are already changing the behavior of this government. The runaway spending of the last few years, it's over. Now we must return Washington to a basic truth. Debt matters. The debt limit is one of the most important opportunities Congress has to change course. How will we respond to determine what happens to our children and to their children in coming years and decades? The choice is clear. We can have reckless spending, or we can have responsibility. We cannot have both. We can leave our children a future with higher inflation, higher interest rates, and crushing debt, or we can leave them free to pursue happiness as God intended. What Americans want and what Republicans are fighting for is a responsible debt limit increase that puts us on a path towards a healthier economy. We will curb wasteful Washington spending to reduce inflation and return our government to fiscal sanity. We will preserve our ability to defend this nation against threats abroad. Cuts to Medicare and Social Security, they are off the table. Defaulting on our debt is not an option, but neither is a future of higher taxes, higher interest rates, and an economy that doesn't work for working Americans. Debt limit debates have been used for nearly every successful attempt to reform federal spending in living history. Why? Because the problem only gets solved when both parties come to the table.